What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you my DLC review for Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 and its Flower and Flame DLC, which, combined with the summer update that dropped alongside of it, is very likely the last major content we will see for this game. Now, this DLC did drop a couple of days ago. I did pay for it myself. No review key or anything like that. I've simply been covering this game and wanted to see it through to the end. And while this particular DLC does have some interesting updates, the ability to actually wield guns these days, a story that is actually a little better than I expected it to be, and suddenly we've got some stuff to talk about. But as I have stated many times with this title, it is a perfectly fine action game, but it is a poor sequel to the original, and while I do think people will probably wind up picking this game up and its DLC for very cheap in the future and having a good time, it's never exactly been a great value, especially considering that this DLC, much like the first, is about $15. The whole thing is roughly 3 hours of content, and while it does add some stuff to the base game via the free patch, that is in fact free. And what you are paying for is a story that, again, better than I expected, but not quite worth what you are paying. With that stuff said, let's actually dive in and talk about first the free update, the summer update, and then we'll get into the DLC. So the free update brought us photo mode. They do take the time to remind people that while you are in first person, much of your character is not rendered, and so if you want to actually take a picture of your character, you'll need to be in like conversation or something like that where your character is actually visible on screen, like when you're feeding. To go with that, they also added options to remove the heads-up display as well as like health bars for enemies. They've also added a noir mode. If you want to recreate that look in Fabien's detective sequences, you can set that as a filter, or when you're playing fire, you'll get like a neo-noir look. But really the big change that they made here is that you can now pick up and wield weapons, both in the DLC, yes, but also in the base game. And alongside the previous DLC that I've already reviewed, adding that with melee weapons, you're now able to actually pick up and hold all of the weapons in the game. The guns actually do have a couple of other effects that you might be wondering about. For instance, you will automatically discard them when they run out of ammo. They're very much like a pick up and throw away kind of situation. You don't keep them on you. And to that end, if you pick up the large weapons, they actually do affect your detection and stealth, like how easily enemies will spot you. If you're carrying large weapons, they notice you faster. And then on top of all of that, now that you can actually pick up and wield weapons, citizens and even police officers will react to them. And as a result, there is a stow weapon option, which is default to tab on PC, that will let you, of course, stow them and walk around without having to deal with this, because if you're walking around with your guns out, citizens might panic if you point them in their directions, and cops will in fact take it for the threat that it would very much be and react accordingly. Those are the main things for the free update in particular. So now let's go ahead and move on to the DLC portion. So this DLC, Flower and Flame, puts us in the role of Isabella. So this character was one of the boss fights, you'll remember if you played the base game. And much like the first DLC, what we're seeing is basically the story of how they got to that position, their role in the main narrative plot, in this particular case, why she throws herself away in seemingly a futile fight, while also giving us some background information, if you will, to the main story that I actually thought was really interesting. This woman being a toreador, they're all about that sort of tortured artist aesthetic, and it, in many ways, I would say is very much like the iconic vampire that people think of when they think the term of vampire. But in Vampire the Masquerade, toreador in particular really embody that sort of beautiful tragedy archetype, and this DLC really leans into that pretty hard, showing us both the origins of this character, how she was sired, how she got involved with the plot in the main event, and actually does a really good job of both peeling back the layers of this character and actually providing a decent motivation and reasoning behind what happened here. And while I'm not saying they're going to win any awards or anything, the storytelling for this DLC is a bit better than I was expecting, especially after the first one, because Benny just honestly isn't a super compelling character to me. Now, structurally speaking, we're going to see all of that in much the same way that Benny's DLC played out, which is a few short missions and then the big end sequence. Some of these are very, very simple. Run in, kill a few enemies and leave, that kind of thing, and there is a larger portion towards the end of the DLC that plays around with surrealism, and I guess the simplest way to put it would be basically guiding this character through which pieces of herself to cut apart as she seeks to burn everything around her in some form or another. In order to do all of that, however, we do of course have some new mechanics specific to this character, as we are not playing the Elder Vampire from the beginning, which is very much reflected here because she has a pretty low health pool. She makes up for it by being very fast, however, obviously leaning into the celerity of the Toreador. Much of her abilities are in fact Toreador abilities, but you can swap a few of them out here and there, just like with the Benny DLC, so you don't have to use them exclusively. You do have an alternative option for each slot. But where it gets interesting are, at least in my opinion, her weapons. So by default, Isabella uses a rapier to make melee attacks, which means she is always wielding a melee weapon at the very least. And because of this, they gave her a bunch of unique animations for all of like the feeding and mid-combat attacks, that kind of stuff that I thought was shockingly good. I actually preferred some of these animations to what they did in the base game. And to make that a little more interesting, they also gave her a razor wire whip. This is an ability you can activate to, of course, whip enemies. This can grab them and sort of lock them down for a minute while you then hit them with melee or focus on other enemies, etc. But you can also use this whip to grab objects and the like in the environment, and it's possible to grab them, pull them to you, and then just like hit them with a melee attack, which will send them flying, or it's also possible to bring them to you and then immediately equip them, which then makes use of the holding guns mechanic as you would expect. So it's possible to, say, get an enemy to drop their weapon, then pick it up at range, equip it, and then start blasting people to shreds with her improved celerity, which honestly felt pretty fun. But with how short the DLC is, that really is kind of all there is to talk about with this particular one. If you couldn't tell by the rest of the video, I would, for the most part, recommend buying all of this game on sale when you start seeing those pick up with all the DLC included. Hell, I think it's on a sale right now for like 50% off. And I think that's the best way to approach all of this, because while I paid $15 for this DLC, because I'll make my money back on this video, it's really just not a great value for money in terms of everyone else, I would say. So again, better than I expected it to be. I actually enjoyed the story, and even playing as this character was more fun than I expected, and yet it still just isn't living up to the price. Like I said though, I do fully expect this to pretty much be the end of Bloodlines 2 and its content. This is the end of the DLC they had announced and thus had to deliver on because they sold it. And so while I would probably expect a couple of more updates in general, given this game's overall reception and everything, I would be surprised if they did anything else substantial with it. And thus, this is very likely to be my final video on it, which is where we're going to wrap up this particular video. So, certainly hope you enjoyed it. If you happen to play this DLC, I'd love to know what you think about it down in the comments section below, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.